just bucket after bucket over my face while I got a foot on my chest. And I remember not being able to breathe.
Holding onto an electric fence.
And then he would bite you by the ear to make you stand back up. Because, you get kneed in the leg,
She said she wanted to die, so he forced her to run into the brick wall outside.
Dude get kicked in the face while he was doing push-ups. Wired his jaw shut.
Stomach, the chest, the back of the head, whatever.
Violence, violence, more violence. If you reach out to the authorities to get some sort of safety, more violence will come.
So I was 14 when I went to Bethel. I was one of the kids that probably deserved to be at a boys' home, not specifically Bethel, but I was adopted by my aunt and uncle when I was like 5. My parents were drug addicts. Aunt and uncle were super out Christians, super religious. So elementary school, I just couldn't stay in school. I got expelled from 3 schools, mostly fighting. And so I was, I think, 12 or 13. They sent me to another boys' home here in California. It was called Faith Home Teen Ranch. Sorry, almost drew a blank on that one.
So before you went to Bethel, you were at another spot?
Yeah, so I was at one. Nothing like Bethel. I mean, this was more. It was a Christian-based place, obviously by the name. About 45 minutes from home, and didn't want to be there. And being 45 minutes from home, I just kept running away. I mean, so my parents' solution was, let's send him somewhere where he can't run away from. And so the director of that place, I guess, had heard of Bethel. And so they decided to send me, to where I'm not just going to show up at the doorstep 2 days later.
Yeah, yeah. So how did they take you there? I mean, how did you get sent to Bethel? And you were a big 14-year-old.
Yeah, I was a pretty big kid.
Yeah, I didn't know you were 14 because I was 16 and you were a lot bigger than me.
Yeah. And I think that's part of my problem because I've always been, when I was younger, kind of a bigger kid. So I think with the fighting and stuff, I did have that bully mentality.
Yeah.
So yeah, I was there. Yeah, I was at Faith Home for just around a year, probably. And after the, I believe, 3rd runaway attempt, followed by an arrest for arson. One of the times I ran away, I camped out behind a grocery store and set some boxes on fire to stay warm. And so I got arrested for arson. And then, yeah, my parents ended up sending me to Bethel. But yeah, that was the final straw. And it's funny, because, not funny, but one of the selling points of the place that I was at was they'd been around for 40 years, I believe, and they'd never kicked out a kid. And so I was getting kicked out of every school. So my parents were like, perfect. So yeah, got the record there. I was the first kid ever to get kicked out.
So did they tell you that did your parents tell you they were taking you to Bethel, or did they just?
No. So I'm obviously runaway risk.
Yeah.
They woke me up at 4 o'clock in the morning. It was my parents and my 350-pound uncle. They drove me to the Sacramento airport and told me that I'm going to a new school, but they didn't tell me where. They were afraid I was going to run away before I got there. I didn't find out I was going to Bethel until our layover in Houston. And I still, at that point, they showed me a brochure, and it had pictures of kids playing football, in full gear. And I was like, heck yeah, Bethel sounds great.
Yeah.
Yeah. Little did I know.
Did you fly by yourself?
No. So my parents both escorted me.
Okay. And then it's funny because I had a layover in Mobile also when I was sent there. I was taken by a bounty hunter, but I remember that not in Mobile, in Houston.
Houston, yeah.
I had a layover in Houston. And so after, and then did you go and land in Mobile?
No, we actually landed in New Orleans.
Okay. And then did they drive you there?
Yeah. So it was a 2-hour drive. And I remember this vividly, bro. It was early January. It was storming out, the typical where nightmares kind of start, the thunder and lightning and rain. And
yeah.
We pull up, we're out in the middle of this nowhere, pull up to this little church that looks like it's straight out of the Children of the Corn. And up until then, I was excited, honestly. Like I was ready to go to this new school and play football and do all the stuff this brochure said. And then we pull up to this church, and I'm like, "What the hell is this? This was not on the brochure."
Yeah, yeah. What time was it when you pulled up to Bethel?
It was late. It was late. I mean, we'd been.
Right. So go over the whole thing when you pull up to the church, and I know you got, I know what it's like pulling up because I pulled up there myself, but just walk through that whole, like, first getting there to the moment you arrive at the church to where your parents drive off and leave.
Okay, so we pull up, and Brother Fountain comes out of the church. Nice little Southern man, which my grandpa, my adopted mom's dad, he was a Southern Baptist preacher. So right away, I think she just felt comfortable with him. He came out, big smile. You know how he was.
Yeah.
Basically said, and he had two boys with him, a kid named Ben and a kid named Mike, two big kids in my eyes. And everybody was just all smiles. And like at that point, I really didn't feel that uncomfortable. He was telling my parents, like, he's in good hands. We kind of had maybe a 10-minute talk, 15-minute talk outside about everything that's going to be expected, everything that's going to go on, the activities we're going to do, and basically made my parents and me feel super comfortable. I think that's the whole con man in Herman Fountain.
Yeah.
But that changed as soon as my parents drove away. Like they didn't even go inside with me. They unloaded my suitcases. We gave each other hugs, and then I got walked into that church. So, and then they walked me inside the church, and that's when it all changed. There was I don't know if you remember, but it's like the stage where he did his preaching. There was like an office in the back of that.
Yeah, yeah.
So they walked me into that office, and that's when I realized I was screwed. Like this was not what he just got done telling my parents. I mean, it started with total strip search. I was a 14-year-old kid, so I was down to my tidy whities. First time ever being in front of an adult like this.
Mm-hmm.
I remember, and this is one of my clearest memories. I had pee stains on my tidy whities from, I think I probably pissed on myself hitting some turbulence trying to pee in a
Yeah.
plain bathroom. And right away, one of the boys that was with him, Ben, started calling me piss boy and started making fun of me for peeing on myself. I was like, the script was flipped immediately once we got in the back of that room. Brother Fountain started just going off on me about not using these specific words, but basically saying I'm a piece of shit, and you're going to get what's coming to you. And these boys who are they're teenagers, they're the ones that are going to be looking after you, and don't mouth off to them because they will beat the snot out of you. And it's like, and I'm still looking around like, where's the football gear?
Yeah.
Like I was still one track mind, like thinking like, okay, this can't be real. But yeah, it was almost instant once my parents left that I knew something was not right. Like, and by the time I left the church and we actually walked through the dorm, I already felt violated. I'd been through at that point, and that's 30 minutes in, I'd been through more. I'd feel like trauma than I'd ever been in my entire life, and even abuse, just verbally, physically. At one point, I started crying, and one of the leaders, Mike, reached over and slapped me right in front of Brother Fountain. Grabbed my, I had a brand new, I just got for my birthday month before, a brand new Golden State Warriors jacket. He grabbed the jacket and ripped it. And this is, like I said, within the first 30 minutes.
Tell me just from the beginning, after they strip search you at the church, they take you to the dorm. Can I just tell me like what your impressions were, what the dorm, just kind of talk about that was like?
When I got in there, it was obviously middle of the winter. It was freezing out when I got there. So they had like these little furnace things. And when I walked in, it was just metal bunk beds lined up with the wooden lockers in between, or cabinets, or whatever you want to call them. There was people had their pants hanging over the little furnaces, trying to dry them out from doing what I didn't realize was pretty much slave labor the day before out in the rain. But when I walked in, I think I was just so tired and so happy to be away from Brother Fountain at that point, and just ready to go to my bed. But that's not what happened. Like I was up all night. So I walk in and they have me put my stuff down. show me where my bunk is. And then the guy, Mike, that was one of the leaders that was with Brother Fountain, he basically said, so now you're going to do what they called the rose garden, but they had me do it indoors. And I was like, the rose garden, there's no roses. So I spent probably 3 or 4 hours after I got there doing duck walks up and down the dorm. The kids, some of the boys had woken up by then, so they're all kind of jeering at me and talking shit. And every time I'd get from one end of the dorm to the other, Mike or Ben, they would smack me. I was a mess. I was a snotty, crying. As long as I was crying, they kept making me do more exercises until I stopped crying. But 14 years old, never been through that. I was kind of, my parents had a lot of money. I was kind of raised with a little bit of a silver spoon, I guess. Like I've never been around that kind of like abuse and just aggression. So yeah, it was probably easily till 3, 4 o'clock in the morning, doing duck walks, wall sits, while these kids just smack me and talk shit to me. And I finally got myself together, I think from just pure exhaustion, and stopped crying, and I was able to go to bed.
What was your kind of like first kind of weeks, and just tell me kind of like what was the structure? What was what did you do on kind of a daily basis? What was kind of some of the discipline like? What was structure like? Like what was just life like at Bethel for you there?
It was basically the first while it was super monotonous. I was put on what they called the I don't like using the word, but the inward crew. Obviously there they used it. And basically my first week, because there was a couple boys that had come in like right around the same time as me. And so we were on this really small crew of guys that they would send us just out in the field with the shovels and pickaxes, have us dig a random ditch. When we got to the end, fill it back in. And I remember just being like blown away, like, when do we go to school? Like, what is this? But yeah, there was no school, there was no nothing. It was get up, do our chores, learn our Bible verse, go to breakfast, the whole marching cadence and stuff. Then get our job assignments, which for me was going to be digging ditches and, busting my ass. And then when that was done, it was dinner time and then back to the dorm. That was really the only time that first week that I didn't feel like just completely overwhelmed. Was once dinner was done, we did go to the dorm and have just a little bit of time where nobody messed with us. I could just lay in my bunk. Brother Fountain did expect me if he walked in, because I was new, to be reading my Bible. And I was a real shy kid. I'm still kind of like that now. I'm pretty much an introvert. So I kind of, for the first little bit, I just stuck to myself, stayed on my bunk, tried not to get hit, and just tried to stay out of the way.
Just kind of talk about the boxing part of it, like what that was, how that went.
Honestly, the fighting in general was probably my saving grace at that place, as far as not being, not living the life that a lot of kids had to live at that place. Again, I was there for fighting. So I remember even before I boxed, this kid Trevor came in that was just bullying everybody. Brother Fountain came up to me and basically said, if you knock the snot out of this kid, like, you don't have to dig a ditch today. So I walked up to him and just knocked him cold.
Fountain came up and told you that?
Yeah, he literally came. This kid was being a bully, and this is what Brother Fountain did. He kind of took what he thought was the tough kids, and he kind of put them under his wing, because he knows that those kids would keep the other kids in line. So I feel like it was this kind of way of testing me. But yeah, there was a kid that came in there that he was a little punk rock kid. He had like eyeliner and just kind of weird, but he was, little tough guy. And he was in there just kind of giving the leaders hell. And so that was basically, he pulled me and a couple other kids aside, and basically made us that deal. Like, if whoever ends up knocking the snot out of this kid, like, you don't have to dig ditches anymore. So I'm like, say less. And just walked up and ended up splitting his eye open pretty good. And yeah, and it was that day that I realized, I mean, I kind of realized it the first day, that I don't want to be a regular kid there. Like, I want to be a leader. I want to be somebody that's in Fountain's good graces, because they're the ones that, you know, didn't get messed with by Brother Fountain. So that was kind of my goal when I went in there. Same thing, you know, I've been to prison multiple times. Same thing when you go to prison almost. Like, you got to assert yourself as a tough guy, else you're going to be messed with. And it was kind of that same atmosphere. So, which is counterproductive for the reason I was there. I was there for fighting. My parents were there to kind of get my anger issues under control. And, you know, then I meet this guy that's basically like, if you can show some aggression, you'll have it easy here. So,
Why do you think he did that?
I think it made his job easy. Honestly, he got to sit back, collect money. I mean, I don't know what your parents were paying, but back in the '90s, my parents were paying around $1,000 a month, which is, you know, that was twice their mortgage. So he got to just sit back, collect the money, and not really worry about things. Like, I don't know if you had the same, or if you remember. I know you had the same experience, but we didn't really see Brother Fountain that much. We saw Bubba and Josh a lot, his sons, but Brother Fountain was just kind of, you know, in and out when something went down, basically. So yeah, I think he used kids like me, and a few other kids, just like digging the ditches, building the houses, all the stuff, just for free labor. Like, he should have hired actual adult staff with what he was getting paid for all of us to run us, but he didn't have to. He was getting paid for us running his business.
And it kept his hands clean.
Kept his hands 100% clean, because who's going to be surprised when these troubled youths are, you know, beating up other troubled youths? Like, that's what's expected.
Yeah.
I never was like physically abused by Brother Fountain or Bubba. I never got switched, nothing like that. Like, I made my mission when I got there to not be that kid, to be the one that, you know, if anything happened, I'd be the one doing the beating, which I think for me psychologically at that point probably fucked me up worse in the long run. I'm not downplaying anybody's experience by any means, but with my mentality, that was probably the worst possible scenario for me. Because I mean, I'm 43 years old, and I just got in a fight New Year's Eve at the bar. You know what I'm saying? Like, it still hasn't left me. It's something that's just was kind of ingrained in me at that age, that, you know, with the aggression and just no fear of anything. And like, I'm lucky to this day. I feel like I'm lucky to be alive, just because I've jumped into fights where I could have got shot, stabbed, killed. I live, you know, 10 miles from Stockton, California, one of the craziest cities in America. I think what psychologically messed me up was just sticking me in that mentality where, let's victimize somebody before you become a victim.
Yeah.
And I still deal with that in relationships and a lot of stuff. Like, I get close to people to this day, and I sabotage the shit out of it before they have a chance to do it to me, you know? So it's definitely affected as an adult, my relationships with women, my relationships with authority. And it was definitely counterproductive for what we should have been there for. It's affected my relationship with God, even. Like, I mean, I just recently, probably a year or so ago, stepped foot into a church, because I get anxiety when I go into churches because of that experience.
You know, it sucks as he had such an opportunity. You know, when kids are, you know, when you lose everything and you're in that position, like, where you're just broken, like, imagine all the good you could do. Like,
Yeah.
Dude, he just, in my mind, Fountain just, I don't know. It's fucked up.
And there are places out there that are like that, like the one I got kicked out of originally, the Faith Home Teen Ranch. That place wasn't messed up. There was no physical abuse. It was faith based. We went to school every day. We had our chores, but it was structured to get us to be responsible and just learn how to kind of grow into adulthood. So I know there's plenty of places out there that aren't like that, but, you know, luck of the draw for us.
Yeah. So what was it like? What was it like going back? Just like coming home. Like, what did you think going home and schooling and going back and like friends, and like, what was that when they eventually took you home?
I'd been trying to tell my parents on phone calls and stuff, like everything going on there. Trying to tell them about my hand is broken and didn't go to the doctor about kids getting beat up. And they just didn't believe me. At one point, actually, Brother Fountain, or no, I'm sorry, Frank, if you remember Frank, Brother Fountain's little minion that lived in
I
there.
remember Frank too, with his gangly old teeth.
Yeah,
It looked like something out of a, I don't know.
obvious meth head. But he actually caught me on the phone one time telling my parents about a beating that just happened, a severe beating. I don't know if you remember Mike Morali.
Yeah.
And supposedly he had, I'm not going to get into, that's his personal business, but yeah, we ended up the whole dorm chasing him out in the woods and stomping the shit out of him. So I'm trying to tell my parents about this, like, this place is crazy. And he caught me. So they ended up, I think at that point, kind of getting an idea that something wasn't quite right. So they flew down under the guise of, like, we're going to do a family vacation type thing. And I believe from my memory, that's when I showed him my hand, which was still severely broken. They ended up, I guess, talking to Brother Fountain and finding out that the whole time we were there, he's not even keeping insurance on us. That's why we didn't go to the doctors. You know, $1,000 a month and you can't pay our insurance bill. So they ended up taking me to a doctor and found out that I broke my hand in like 3 different places. And so they scheduled me to come home. And at that point, I was doing really good as far as being in Brother Fountain's good graces and stuff like that. And it's funny because he'd been telling me up to that point, like, I was supposed to be there. I don't know what they told you. I was supposed to be there 6 months and then go home. So once my parents decided to take me home, and this is another vivid memory, we're all outside playing football, and Josh Fountain just came up and decked me. So I fought back. And at that point, he was still a lot bigger than me. So then he calls my parents and basically tells them that they're crazy if they take me home because I have homicidal tendencies and all this kind of stuff. So at this point, I think my parents started doing their research and they ended up taking me home. But I mean, it was until I moved out of their house when I was like 17. And up until I moved out, that was still always a threat, like going back to Bethel. Which I never, I mean, I ended up dropping out my senior year and getting my GED. School was always easy for me as far as getting good grades. After that point, when I got home, school was never easy for me. It was always a struggle. So not only did I think did it emotionally mess me up being at Bethel, but it educational wise, it definitely messed me up. I mean, that's a big part of our, that time of our life is when we're starting to learn to be adults and be responsible, and and we lost all of that being there. So coming out and going straight to high school when I'd never even been to junior high, and having to be responsible for all my own classes, all my own homework, all my own everything, it was impossible. So, but I did do, like, once I got out, I didn't really get in trouble in high school because there was always that threat of going back to Bethel. Like up until I was 18, there was always that threat.
Did you ever talk to your parents about what happened there after you got out?
I did. So my adopted mom passed away in 2019, and this was not long before I got reconnected with you guys, and all this kind of started resurfacing because I really suppressed a lot of it for most of my adult life. Didn't talk about it. Most people that knew me didn't know about it. And the thing that stands out is I'd never really got an apology. I know my adopted dad, we've talked about it since she's passed, and he's apologized. But he was kind of in that marriage, he didn't call the shots. She did. He was more in the background, just go with the flow. So that's one thing that's always really stuck with me is even up until she passed away, I never really got that acknowledgement from the people that sent me there that this is fucked up. Like, we're sorry. It was more, at that point, I think I'd been to prison only once at that point. but it was kind of when I went to prison, it's like, well, we knew you were going to end up in prison. We told you when you were younger, if you didn't straighten up, you'd end up in prison. I was 30 years old the first time I walked into prison. And there was never that acknowledgement, like, well, maybe what I went through pushed me towards where I'm at now. Like, the stuff I was getting into, like a lot of us, was kid stuff. Like fights at school, like, yeah, mine were kind of excessive sometimes, like as far as the frequency, but it's not stuff that would necessarily make you a criminal. I was out robbing people, getting arrested, stealing cars, none of that, doing drugs, none of that shit. I think it's all stuff I would have grown out of, but because of Bethel, I never had that chance to grow out of it. I got that chance to get it more ingrained into me and make it more part of who I was as an adult. So for me, it would have been nice to just get that acknowledgement, like, instead of it, yeah, you ended up a fuck up when you were 30. Like, we're sorry we had a lot to do with why you fucked up when you were 30. So
I think which everybody wants. What do you get from Bethel? The good, the bad, the ugly. How's it affected your life today? And like, how are you doing now, pretty much?
yeah, so I mean, I think the good thing, this is gonna sound fucked up. The good thing that came out of Bethel is because I did end up in prison. Prison wasn't tough. Like, I've been here, basically. It has made me very outspoken as far as, like, if something's not right, like, I do stand up for myself. I think Bethel did help me with that a little bit, not being bullied, not being pushed around. The bad kind of goes hand in hand with the good almost. It is very easy for me to get aggressive, especially with other dudes. It does make me realize, like, things I've been through to get in trouble as an adult, the consequences to me don't seem that bad when they probably should, because again, I've been through this. All my prison stints, as we were talking about earlier, I've been to prison 3 times on 4 DUIs. Only thing I've really been in trouble for as an adult. I definitely think it did contribute to my substance abuse. I mean, I hadn't even really been in trouble until I was probably 30 years old. And
Yeah. So how are you doing today right now? Like, what's
today,
your life like now?
yeah, I mean, today I'm doing a lot better. I did get out of prison last October. Ended up going into a sober living. Had some struggles since then, but I feel like now my life's finally getting to where I want it to be. But I don't get too excited about it because I've been here before. After my first DUI, I was 7 years sober, had a great job, beautiful family. So as far as where I was a year ago, a lot better. But I also know that the downfall can come super quick. So yeah, but I think that's also one of my negatives of Bethel, is just having relationships with people. I've been through tons of relationships. I can't stay in relationships without fucking it up somehow. So at this point, I'm just kind of happy to kind of do my own thing and try to get my life back.
Yeah.
But
I see some pictures with you and your kids though. So
yeah, no, I love my kids, and that's one thing. I guess this could be a positive out of what I got from Bethel, is I'll never ever abandon my kids. Sorry. No, no matter how fucked up my life gets, like, I'm always going to be there for them. I'll never send them away. I'll never make them think that they're not wanted. Because I know you guys all know that's a shitty feeling. So
I got
yeah.
kids too.
Yeah, I know you. I know you definitely. I know you're a great dad too. So you, like I said, no matter where my life takes me or the trouble I've been in, like, that's one thing, I'm always going to be there for those guys. And they're always going to be able to rely on me and just not have that feeling of being unwanted. And because I mean that was my childhood. I got dropped off by my drug addict parents drug addict, alcoholic parents at my aunt and uncle's. Wasn't wanted. Aunt and uncle couldn't deal with me, sent me away, wasn't wanted, you know? So it's kind of been my life story. And that's, I think for a kid specifically, that's got to be the worst feeling in the world.